Alright, we're up.
That dude was looking at me like, that's funny. 191 people thumbing up. We did have start for the mishap already. Take 3 man. My bad, y'all. Sorry, I'm still working on Eastern time.
Okay, stream, we're gonna go down for a sec because I'm gonna change this to 720p.
Getting the stuff up, but they can't stream themselves streaming. No, we love back and back.
And we love grassroots Yang Gang. And now it's
Oh no,
cross
now things
streams.
are getting complicated.
When did you get into Iowa?
Last night.
Awesome.
Last
How long
night.
are you gonna be here?
Until right before the caucuses. And I've got to head back to New Hampshire because he'll be there before.
Yep. Yeah. I'm here till the 5th, and then I live just right outside Baltimore.
Right.
Fly back there and then figure out what my plans are.
It took me 2 days to drive here.
You drove here?
I drove here.
Wow.
Yes.
That's insane.
Yes. It's crazy. It's like 20 something hours.
Wow.
Did you see the Business Insider article?
I saw it came out. I didn't get a chance to look at it though. I'm gonna have to read it though.
Man, we are peaking at the right time.
No, for sure.
We are peaking at the right time. And I feel like because the way it's like Game of Thrones out here in Iowa, I really feel like we're gonna come out of here like second or third.
I think top 4 at least.
Think so?
Top 4 at least.
Y'all heard it here first, guys.
Did you see the YouGov poll that came out today that has Yang at 1% in Iowa?
Are you kidding me?
And it has Delaney at 1% in Iowa. It's like you think Delaney and Yang have the same level of support.
No.
YouGov is gonna be trash on February 3rd. Like no one's ever gonna take him seriously again.
That is the most ridiculous thing ever.
Like yeah, he's getting 7% in Washington Post nationally, but ignore the YouGov polls. They're so trash. That's my opinion. To both streams.
That's my opinion too.
Yeah.
They've been like that for a while.
Yeah, they're always way below where everyone else is because they throw out the Yang responses.
Right. Like for sure. And then they'll put like other or whatever. They won't even list Yang. You gotta list other.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Love you, Yang Gang. Somebody was watching both streams at the same time.
That's how you do it.
Well, we hope that a lot of y'all tune in here for the show. So we like to talk about anything. Look, don't ever say great stream. That's crazy. We love you, man. You open up 2 pages. You gotta be on like the what you call it, on a computer.
I think there's some sort of like website that allows you to have them like both up at the same time. So at the same stream.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know what it's called though.
Come on, you gotta give them inside information.
Usually people in the chat just figure this kind of stuff out. That's how it is. Because Ed, me and Green, me and him are showing sometimes. You're selling too much both at once. It's like some multicast website.
If y'all know what that is, put it in the chat. If y'all know what the multicast thing is. Look, we just need to get some more cameras and we'll just have like a 360 view.
Yeah. That's actually something me and Ted want to set up. We just don't know how to get it done. You have one camera, say in that corner, facing the crowd, and then one right on Andrew. So every time there's a crowd reaction, you just auto flip it. But the way with like the signals, like it might be out of sync and stuff. But there's definitely a way to do that. There's like some cool stuff that can be done.
For sure. Yeah, we were trying to figure something out too.
And as Yang says, people are the internet and everyone else.
So we have to educate ourselves.
Yep.
Thanks, Andrew.
We gotta match the hype.
We gotta bring the pain, gang. For sure. We got a crowd showing up. Crowd. Yes, it's a small room. You gotta think it's Sunday afternoon. Iowa. People are still getting out of church. Crowd reaction is definitely important. We like to catch as many of those as we can. Whenever we can. There's 225 on mine right now. You know how many go through it?
I have no clue, but I can look.
There will be more because everybody on this channel is going to be tweeting this out, Facebooking it out. Make sure we get as many eyeballs as we can.
I think Fox News is live streaming this one as well.
Fox News.
Hi everyone, how's it going this afternoon? Yeah, come on, yeah. We're about to see the next president of the United States. This is a big deal. We're excited. So I'm going to ask you to silence your cell phones, to turn them off if possible, so they don't ring during the event. My name is Conrad. I work for the Andrew Yang campaign. Up until a few months ago, I was actually on city council in a town in upstate New York. I was elected as the youngest elected official in New York State. And I feel like I'm here today on behalf of young people because we are concerned about our future. We're concerned about climate change, about healthcare, about the fact that this generation, our generation, is the first one that is going to have a minority chance of educating and graduating and being less successful than our fathers and mothers and parents and ancestors before us. This is something that we are generally and genuinely afraid of. And it's why I'm here standing here in front of all of you. So it is a privilege, it is an honor to introduce the next president of the United States, Andrew Yang.
Let's go, Andrew!
So we just had the brunch upstairs and it is so good. Oh my gosh. I thought to myself, I was like, did we pay for brunch for people who attended this thing? Did we? I don't know. It was almost like if we did, like we did, this is like the best food we bought anyone at any campaign event we ever had. It's a thrill to be here with you all. You don't realize it probably, but you're among the most powerful, influential people in our country today. I did the math. Do you know how many Californians each Iowan caucus goer is worth? 1,000 Californians each, that's right. So if you look around this room today, how many of us are there? I'm going to give a Trumpian estimate. There are about 300 people here. The biggest gathering people have seen. It looks like there are about 20 people here, but 20 people is still almost a football stadium full of Californians. That's why it's a thrill to campaign here, because you all can turn our entire country in a whole new direction on February 3rd. How many of you have seen TV ads with my face and name on it? Good, because we spent a lot of money on those ads. And so if you've seen these ads, you know that I'm not a career politician, I'm an entrepreneur and problem solver. And I'm running for president in part to help us address a challenge that the country has been confused about for the last several years. And that challenge is this. Why is Donald Trump our president today? Why did he win Iowa, a traditional swing state, by almost 10 points? Now, if you turned on cable news anytime in the last number of months, you've gotten a number of answers to that question. So what are the answers that we've been given as to why Donald Trump won in 2016? Hillary Clinton is on the list.
Economic.
Economics, yeah. for sure. And we're gonna
Farmers,
go into that.
stock market.
Farmers, stock market, Russia.
Non-traditionalist or non-traditional politician.
Not a politician, because many of us are fed up with DC politicians. I'm going to return to the economy because I'm a numbers guy, and that's where my mind went. And I went and looked through the numbers, and I found a set of numbers that I think you'll find very familiar and very, very compelling as to why Donald Trump won Iowa by almost 10 points. We eliminated 4 million manufacturing jobs over the last number of years. And where were those jobs primarily located?
In the Midwest.
Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, and 40,000 right here in Iowa. And I've been to those towns in Iowa, and after the manufacturing jobs dried up, the shopping district closed, people left, the school shrank, and that community has never recovered. I saw the same thing play out in Missouri, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, because I spent the last 7 years running a nonprofit that helped create thousands of jobs in those places. And unfortunately, what happened to those manufacturing jobs is now shifting to other parts of our economy. How many of you have noticed stores closing around where you live here in Iowa? And why are those stores closing? Amazon, that's right. Amazon's like a spaceship sucking up $20 billion in business every year, closing 30% of our stores and malls. The most common job in the economy is retail clerk. Average retail clerk's a 39-year-old woman, making between $8 and $12 an hour. What is her next opportunity after the store closes? We're not really sure. How much did Amazon pay in federal taxes last year? Zero. That is your math here in Iowa. 20 billion out, zero back, 30% of your stores and malls closed, most common job starts to disappear. You've seen this happen on your main streets. You see it even in the fast food restaurants, McDonald's with the self-serve kiosks. The changes are throughout the economy. When you all call the customer service line of a big company and you get the bot or the software on the other end, I'm sure you do the same thing I do, which is you pound 000, say human, representative, over and over again until you get something on the line. Raise your hand, that's what you do. Oh yeah, we all do that. That software is terrible. All of us think to ourselves, a human being works for this company somewhere, and I'm going to find them. Just keep pounding that keypad. But in 2 or 3 short years, the software will sound like this. Hey, Andrew, how's it going? What can I do for you? It'll be fast, seamless, efficient. You might not even know it's software. What is this going to mean for the 2.5 million Americans who work at call centers right now making $10 to $14 an hour? How many of you all know a truck driver here in the States? Driving the truck's the most common job in 29 states, including this one. 3.5 million truckers in our country. My friends in California are working on trucks that can drive themselves. They say they're 98% of the way there. A robot truck just transported 20 tons of butter 4 weeks ago from California to Pennsylvania with no human intervention. Why did they choose butter for this maiden voyage? I really don't know. But if you Google robot butter truck, you will see the story pop up. And at the end of the route was a giant stack of pancakes, as far as I'm making up the pancakes. But everything else is real. What will these self-driving trucks mean for the 3.5 million Americans who drive a truck right now for a living, or the 7 million Americans who work at truck stops, hotels, and diners that rely upon the truckers getting out and having a meal every day? How many of you have been to Iowa 80 in Davenport? Yeah, they also have a meat buffet. Not quite as good as this one. They say that 5,000 people stop at Iowa 80 every day. How many people will stop at Iowa 80 if the trucks don't have drivers anymore? We're in the midst of the greatest economic transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the 4th Industrial Revolution. Chances are, this is the first time you've even heard a politician say the words 4th Industrial Revolution, and I'm barely a politician. My wife jokes, well, first, I never intended to run for president. If my wife thought that I was going to run for president when we were dating, she would have run the other direction. And in my household growing up, my parents were never like, you're going to be president someday. They were more like, you're terrible, clean your room. So I was the founder and CEO of this nonprofit that was creating jobs around the Midwest and the South, but I had this sinking feeling that my work was like pouring water into a bathtub that had a giant hole ripped in the bottom. And then the water is rushing out more and more. Donald Trump wins. We're scapegoating immigrants for problems that immigrants have very little to do with. If you go to a factory in Michigan, you don't find wall-to-wall immigrants. What do you find? wall-to-wall robots and machines. So I went to our leaders in Washington, D.C. in 2017. And I asked, now I spent some time in D.C. I was honored by the Obama administration multiple times for my work creating this organization that created these jobs. So I got to bring my wife Evelyn to meet the president. Obama, I guess, be clear. So my in-laws were very excited about me that week. They were like, "You did all right." I had these pictures, and other people. So I spent some time in DC, and I went back to DC to ask them, what are we going to do to help our people manage this economic transformation that we're in the midst of? That's about to accelerate, because the technology is getting smarter and faster in a way that, frankly, we are not. Now, I'm a parent. I've got 2 young kids, a little bit older than her.
Yeah,
Yeah. How are you? So I've got a 4 and 7-year-old, and they're getting smarter. But the rest of us are not. Like most of us are happy to just about stay the same. But technology is not staying the same. It's ramping up very, very fast. So I went to our leaders in Washington, D.C., and I asked, what are we going to do to help our people manage this transition? And what do you think the folks in D.C. said to me when I said, what are we going to do? You said nothing? Yeah, at another event, someone made the Scooby-Doo noise. They were like, "Whoa, whoa." So the answers I got out of DC were, number 1, we cannot talk about this. Number 2, we should study this. And then number 3 will be more familiar to you. We should educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. Raise your hand if you've heard something like that from a politician at some point. Oh yeah, we all have. And it sounds sort of responsible. But I'm the numbers guy, and I went looking at the studies. Do you all want to guess how effective the government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs in the Midwest? Now, you're all shaking your head and laughing, and you know it's low, because I'm anchoring it low, but also you know human beings. You know if you have hundreds of manufacturing workers here in Iowa who lose their jobs, they don't all march out and say, I'm ready for my coding boot camp now. I've been waiting for this opportunity. Like that's not the way people work. The success rates of these retraining programs were very low. They were 0 to 15%. The truth is that almost half of the manufacturing workers in the Midwest who lost their jobs left the workforce and didn't work again. And of that group, almost half filed for disability. We then saw surges in suicides and drug overdoses in those communities to the point where America's life expectancy has now declined for the last 3 years in a row. You know the last time America's life expectancy declined for 3 years in a row? 20s, Great Depression, very, very good guess. That's close. It's the Spanish flu of 1918, a global pandemic that killed millions. You have to go back 100 years because it's highly unusual for your life expectancy to ever decline in a developed country. It ordinarily goes up and up because you're getting richer, stronger, healthier. But here in the US, it's gone down and then down and then down again. So when I said this to the folks in DC, one of them said something that sent me here to you all today. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one here is going to do anything about this because fundamentally, Washington, D.C. is a town of followers, not leaders. And the only way we would do something about it is if you were to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. And I said, challenge accepted. I'll be back in 2 years. And that was 2 years ago, and here we are. A poll just came out that had me 4th in the polls to be the Democratic nominee. My campaign. This campaign raised $16.5 million last quarter in increments of only $35 each. So my fans are almost as cheap as Bernie's. But there was no corporate PAC money in there. This is just people trying to take back our government to make it work for us again. Because it's not working for us right now. This is a big reason why Trump won. So right now, we have all this value that's leaving your communities. You have Amazon paying 0 in taxes. And one question I'd ask you all, whose fault is it that Amazon's paying 0 in taxes? Is it their fault? No. I mean, it's their job to pay as little as possible. So they're all high-fiving each other, being like, we did it, 0 taxes for another year. Because they actually regularly pay 0 taxes. This is not unusual. So it's our fault. It's our government's fault. Our government has to be either asleep at the switch or corrupt to allow a $1 trillion tech company to pay less in taxes than everyone sitting in this room. So that is what we are together to change. We have to get that value that's leaving our community, that's depleting so many rural areas of this country, and bring it back to you in the form of a dividend. Now, if you've seen the ads, you know that I want to give every American $1,000 a month starting at age 18. Raise your hand if you saw that. Oh, you like that? Oh, now raise your hand again if you think or thought that's a gimmick too good to be true, will never happen. Raise your hand on that. And I understand, but it's not my idea and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for this at the founding of our country, called it the Citizens' Dividend for all Americans. Martin Luther King, whose birthday we celebrated just this week, was fighting for this when he was killed in 1968. And I know this is what he was fighting for because I met with Martin Luther King's son in Atlanta, and he said this is what his dad was fighting for. 1,000 economists, including Milton Friedman, one of the godfathers of modern economics, endorsed this plan in the 60s. So mainstream, it passed the US House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Nixon. Wow, she likes it. Oh, she remembers. He wasn't all bad. And in the early 80s, one state actually passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that?
Alaska.
And how does Alaska pay for it?
Oil companies.
That's funny. The fish dividend. I like it. We all get a halibut. It's oil money. And what is the oil of the 21st century?
Data.
Technology, data, AI, self-driving cars and trucks. A study just came out that said that our data is now worth more than oil. How many of you saw that? How many of you got your data check in the mail last month? So if your data is now worth billions of dollars a year and you are not seeing a dime of it, then where is all of that money going? Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, the trillion-dollar tech companies that are paying zero or next to zero back into our country. So this is the game. This is what we have to change. And in this context, if you get this value that's leaving your communities, get a tiny, tiny sliver of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, every robot truck mile eventually, every data sale, then we can easily afford $1,000 a month for every American. Particularly because after this money's in your hands, where would you spend it? Where would it actually go? How much of it would stay right here in your community? Most of it, not all of it. You might get your own Netflix password. But most of it would go to car repairs you've been putting off, and daycare expenses for Allison, no daycare yet. And Little League signups, and local nonprofits, and religious organizations. She didn't like the nonprofits. She was like, don't donate that money. Only toys. This is the trickle-up economy, because this money would go right back into your communities, making you stronger, healthier, mentally healthier, give us more time with our kids. This trickle-up economy is how we actually make it work for the next generation. And what Conrad was saying was something I share as a parent. How many of you all are parents like me? If you're a parent, then at some point you've had this sinking feeling that we're leaving our kids a future that is less bright, less secure, and less prosperous than the lives that we've led. And that's because that is what we are doing. If you were born in the 1940s in the United States of America, there's a 93% chance you're going to do better than your parents. That's the American dream. That's what brought my family here. That's what we aspire to for our kids. But if you were born in the 1990s, you're down to a 50-50 shot in this country, and it's declining fast. That is why the parents here feel the way we do. That's why the young people feel the way you do. You feel like the deck is getting stacked against you. So in this context, you put $1,000 a month into our hands, and then we can look our kids in the eyes and say, your country loves you, your country values you, and your country will actually invest in you in your future. People can tell when you're actually investing in them and when you're talking about it but not doing it. And right now we're talking about it and not doing it. We're being told that things are great throughout our economy. You have record high corporate profits, record high GDP, they say record low unemployment. You've all seen this stuff, right? And yet you've thought to yourself, wait a minute, things do not seem to be going great around me, my family, my community, and where I live. So we have record high corporate profits right now. You know what else are at record highs in the United States of America? Suicide, substance abuse, drug overdose, mental health problems, anxiety, financial insecurity, student loan indebtedness. Record lows in the United States of America.
Entrepreneurship.
Starting a business for a young person, getting married, having a kid. All the things that you associate with a thriving society are at record lows right now. If corporate profits are going up and life expectancy is going down, which do you listen to? We know which one DC is listening to. DC can't even see people in life expectancy anymore. DC is just following the money. Washington, DC today is the richest city in our country. Think about that for a second. What do they produce? None of us knows. But business is awfully good. Donald Trump said he wanted to drain the swamp, and that had a lot of appeal for a lot of us. I want to do something a little bit different. I want to distribute the swamp. Now, what do I mean by that? Why do we employ hundreds of thousands of people in the most expensive city in the country? Why wouldn't we move some of those jobs to Michigan, Ohio, Iowa, Pennsylvania? We would save billions of dollars right off the bat, and I would argue that those government agencies would make better decisions because they were living someplace normal and not in a DC bubble where they just talk to each other all the time.
Yeah.
I'm for term limits for members of Congress. And I know how to pass it too. This will be a lot of fun. But if you elect someone to Congress, their job should be to go to DC and try and do work on your behalf and then come home. It should not be to go there and then be like, ooh, I like it here, let me stay forever. Please don't make me go home. Like, I mean, that's not why people were sent there. So here's how you get term limits done. I will be your president a year from now. Thank you for that. And I will go to Congress and say, hey, we should have 12-year term limits for all members of Congress, but current lawmakers are exempt. Do you think they'd pass that? They would. They would pass that the next day and say, we do this for the American people. Because they're exempt. They would say, hey, I get to hang out for as long as possible. I'm grandfathered in. But then eventually they would lose, they would get phased out, and then you'd have a legislature that actually responds to us. Because right now their decision making is all tied up in what they think is going to preserve their careers, keep winning, and make the companies as much money as possible, unfortunately. Right now, if you have people on one side and money on the other, who's winning in America? It's the money, really. The money has just overrun everything. It's overrun our government, overrun our healthcare system, overrun our way of life. This is what you all have to reverse. We have to see to it that the economy works for us and that it's not all us somehow working for the economy, which is what we've kind of gotten brainwashed into. My wife joked, she said, how could something that was so mainstream in the 60s now require the futurist Asian man to like drag it into the light again? Like, what the heck happened over those 50, 60 years? And over those 50, 60 years, we agreed that somehow our country has begun to confuse economic value and human value as the same things. And we have to say they're not the same things. We and our children all have intrinsic value as Americans, as citizens, and as shareholders of the richest country in the history of the world. Right now, we're measuring corporate profits and our life expectancy is going the other direction. We should be measuring how we're doing based upon how we are doing. That sounds profound, but this would actually be a huge step forward. So as your president, I will modernize our economic measures to, instead of being how the companies are doing, it will be our health and life expectancy, our mental health and freedom from substance abuse, childhood success rates for the next generation, clean air and clean water, the proportion of Americans who can retire in quality circumstances. Because I know what it's like, now that I have parents who are of this age, I know what it's like to be living on a fixed income, and you know your income's gonna be here, and then your expenses keep creeping up. There is no faster way to make someone feel anxious and stressed out than to put them in that situation. So these are the core measurements of our society. And as your president, I will report them to you every year at the State of the Union. I'd be the first president to use a PowerPoint deck in the State of the Union. So these are the big changes we can make. I've got a whole list of changes on the website. I've got literally 150, 160. But the key here is to actually see to it that the machines work for us. Because right now the machines are getting faster and stronger all the time. And instead of working for us, we're somehow supposed to outrace them to this finish line. And that's not a race that any of us is equipped to win over the long haul. We have to actually change the rules of the economy, so instead of what benefits the companies, it revolves around what's working for us and our families. And I say this having spoken to a group of 70 CEOs in New York City, and I asked them, how many of you are looking at replacing your back office workers with artificial intelligence and software? Guess how many hands went up? All of them. The fact is you could fire any CEO who didn't have his hand up, and I say his because most of them are men. And that's the system we built. The system is that what's good for the company is required for that CEO to keep his job. If he were to deviate from that, he'd be fired the next day and they would find someone else. So we have to actually change the rules of this economy, rewrite them, so that instead of trying to maximize the bottom line of these companies, we're trying to maximize your health, your family's health, your mental health. And this would give us a chance to actually address the problems that got Donald Trump elected in the first place. Democrats are making a mistake by acting as if Donald Trump is the source of all of our problems. He's not. He's a symptom of a disease that's been building for years. And it is up to you on February 3rd to help this country we love cure the disease. That's why we need you to caucus for this campaign on February 3rd. Because if we don't make this move, what happens over the next 4 years? Iowa has been ground zero for this economic transformation in many respects. You saw this happen on your farms, the consolidation and mechanization of many of the farming jobs. Then you saw it shift to your factories, 40,000 manufacturing jobs eliminated and counting. Now it's shifting to your main streets as 30% of your stores close. You have to stop it before it hits your highways. If we don't take this chance on February 3rd, what happens over the next 4 years? Oh no, we lost Allison. No, she's so cute. I assumed she would ask a question.
We need to change the icons.
Yeah, that's cool then. I've been there. Come on, man. So you all have to turn the tide and make this work for people as quick as possible, because time's not on your side, honestly. I mean, what happens in the next 4 years? More stores close, AI gets smarter, self-driving trucks fit close to the highways. This is it. This is the time. And this set of ideas is how a totally anonymous citizen like myself has now already outcompeted and outlasted 6, 8 senators, governors, members of Congress, is because I'm focused on the real problems that we can see around us, and I have real proposals and solutions that would improve our way of life. It's fun. Where are the costs? It's great. We've got a bus and everything. Bus, TV commercials, my wife's here, my kids are here. They made a snowman, they stuck a bumper sticker on him. Donald Trump's our president today because he had a very simple, powerful message. Make America great again. What was Hillary Clinton's response to that 3.5 years ago?
Stronger together.
America's already great. There was also Stronger Together, but there was America's already great. You remember that? It's been a long 3 years, I know. But it's now coming to an end. Hillary's response did not work for many Americans because the problems are real. We have to acknowledge their reality and depth and severity, but then we need solutions that will move our communities and our country forward. What were Donald Trump's solutions? Build a wall, turn the clock back, bring the old jobs back. You know, Iowans know, Americans know, we have to turn the clock forward. we have to accelerate our economy and society to rise to the real challenges of this time, like climate change. We have to evolve in the way we see ourselves and our work and our value. I am the ideal candidate for this job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you all very much. You may not know this, but math is an acronym, and what does it stand for?
Make America think harder.
Make America think harder. That's right. That's your job on February 3rd, to move this country we love. Not left, not right, but forward. And I know that's just where you'll take us. Thank you so much. Let's take some questions.
Let's go ahead, dude.
Yeah, Deputy County. Yeah, all right, sorry. I haven't seen him in a little while. So. Happy to take questions. If anyone wants to ask Andrew any. Someone's got a question. Like where did Allison go? When will she be back? Oh, good. She's gonna vote for my re-election?
So I'm a Californian, so my question is only worth 1/1000th of anybody else's. But I wanted to ask
What are
you
you doing here? Cast it out.
about climate change.
Yeah.
Because that's also an opportunity to retool the economy in Iowa. That already happens a lot with biofuels. You see all coming from. Well, could you talk about that and what you think the solution is for getting to a climate future that we can live in?
How many of y'all are concerned about climate change? Me too. You really have to be at this point. So I get frustrated when politicians talk about preventing climate change. What's wrong with that statement? It's already here. We're on the curve. You've seen the last 4 years, these shocking photos from Australia. Have you seen this stuff? It looks like some kind of science fiction movie come to life. Now, there are a couple of big things we have to do to try and move us in the right direction on climate change. I'm going to tie this back into some of the bigger economic issues just for a second. In a country where 78% of us are living paycheck to paycheck and almost half of us can't afford an unexpected $500 bill, if I go to you and say, hey, we need to fight climate change, what's a very natural response for many Americans who are in that situation?
What's it gonna cost?
Yeah, it's like,
Can't pay for it, can't pay for solar panels.
yeah, it's, I can't pay next month's rent. I'm just trying to like piece this together. Like, I can't worry about a problem that's a year or 10 years from now. And then the next natural human response is, it's probably not that bad anyway, maybe he was trying to scare me, whatever it is. So if you can get the boot off of people's throats so that they feel secure in their future and their kids' future, then they're more likely to say, yeah, we really need to solve these big problems that affect us all. The other thing that many Americans hear is what you just said, is if I say we need to fight climate change, they hear, you want to make prices higher, you want to make my life more convenient, you want to take away the jobs. So that's what we have to change as a country together. We have to incorporate the cost of climate change into our economic measures so that people can see that this actually creates value and saves money and will save us all money rather than doing nothing. So one of the things I ask Americans is, how much do you think climate change is going to cost? If you had to put a price tag on it. For reference, our economy is $21 trillion a year. So climate change over time is going to cost us what?
More than that.
Tens of trillions of dollars over time, because if you look at like a couple trillion a year over time, it still winds up being tens of trillions. So if you put it in those terms, you realize that doing nothing is actually incredibly expensive. And investing hundreds of billions of dollars, making our communities more resilient, more secure, more adaptive, actually is a big cost saver. Because it's cheaper to put up an embankment on the river than it is to clean up the town after it's been flooded, after the fact. So this is what we have to let our fellow Americans know, is that investing in mitigating the worst effects of climate change is an efficiency move. It saves us money. It will create hundreds of thousands of jobs, and it should bring our costs down instead of up. Now that's a big shift for many Americans, but many Americans now realize that we can't continue to do nothing on climate change and expect things to go well for us and our kids. The toughest part of this entire situation is that the United States of America is only 15% of global emissions. The rest of the world is 85%. What's happening with the rest of the world is that China is going to Africa with coal-burning power plants and saying, what do you think? And then what do you think the African government responds? Sure, I'll take it. Like, they're not worried about anything but cheap energy. So then what do we have to do to change that? We have to be there at that table with the African government and say, don't take the coal burning power plant, take these solar panels, and we will subsidize them. That is the way we have to lead if we're going to get the other 85% down. But the truth is, even if we get our own emissions under control, and I would put a price on carbon and pollution on day one, I would zero out the subsidies for fossil fuel companies and move them towards wind and solar, particularly solar. And I try and lead the rest of the world in this direction very aggressively. Pulling out of the Paris Accords was the wrong move, but the truth is the Paris Accords were not going to cut off climate change. They were a step in the right direction, but we would need to go even more aggressively. So we should try going in the right direction while acknowledging that we're already on the curve and we can't leave families and towns on their own to fend for themselves in the face of the floods or the fires or the fact that their town is becoming uninhabitable. We have to say this is an us problem, not a you problem, and then put federal resources to work at the very highest levels. Thank you. But yeah, I'm worried about climate change too. It's a freight train bearing down on us. And so that's actually the wrong metaphor, because it's already happening. It's more like where the frog in the pot's heating up, something like that. Literally, I suppose. So instead of the frog, we're humans. And instead of the pot, it's the planet. So this metaphor is not that helpful. I will come up with a better climate change metaphor.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you for being here. My question is about the freedom dividend and how you intend to pay for it with the value-added tax.
Yeah.
So, I guess what I'm concerned about, or what I'm wondering about, is if you intend to have companies pay for this at the point of sale, what's to keep them from just increasing the price of what we're paying for to accommodate that?
No, it's very reasonable. And in some contexts, some of that probably would get passed along to us. It's one reason why you'd want to exempt certain things from the value-added tax that are core for most American families. So I'm going to throw out some items: diapers, toilet paper, like things that we just consume. You're like, you know what? We're not going to actually put the VAT on that. And then maybe you ramp the VAT up on things like artificial intelligence, yachts, luxury watches. But if you put $1,000 a month into people's hands, you'd have to spend an awful lot to end up losing more than $12,000 a year based upon any kind of incremental cost increase. You pretty much would need to be buying something very, very nice and fancy. When we did the math, this plan would increase the buying power of 90% plus of Americans. And the richest Americans, most of whom frankly are living in these coastal enclaves, they're the best equipped to pay. So when we worked out the ledger, 90% of us end up being net winners with this system. And this is the most extreme winner-take-all economy in the history of our country. So I like to use Jeff Bezos as an example because he's so famous. So Jeff's worth $115 billion post-divorce. Not a judgment, just, that's how much he's worth now. So the question is, he's got this $1 trillion tech company that's paying zero taxes. So if we get this tax on Amazon, we'll end up effectively getting hundreds of millions of dollars from Jeff. And then when Jeff takes $1 billion out of his wealth every year and buys rocket ships to Mars, which is what he does, by the way, you have a pretty high tax on rocket ships to Mars. And so we'll end up getting lots from him to put back in. And so for the average consumer, you'll end up paying pennies on the dollar. And for Jeff, he'll be paying millions on the dollar. And I think that's a much more effective way to balance out the economy. We also have to balance the economy out between rural areas and urban areas. And doing it around our people is the most effective way to do it. When I was in Des Moines talking to state legislators, they said to me, this is the only thing they've seen that would actually give rural towns a path forward in their communities. And so it's rebalancing it between the Jeffs and the us's, but it's also rebalancing it between communities. Because right now, more and more economic value is getting absorbed by the cities at the expense of rural communities around the country. Yes, sir.
So I appreciate the focus on the economics and the future. So where are you on like Medicare for all and some of those other issues, the student debt and things like that?
Well, first I would say those are also all core economic issues, particularly healthcare. I believe that healthcare should be a right of citizenship in this country. We should have universal healthcare. I would not get rid of private insurance companies by trying to legislate them away. I would try and demonstrate that this public plan actually is just a better option. We should not have our healthcare tied to our jobs at all. It's an historical accident. It was because of World War II, there were pay caps and they started stacking insurance on top to attract people. And then we got left with this hodgepodge system that's a disaster on so many levels. On the deepest personal level, an Iowa family doctor at another town told me that the cycle that happens is someone gets sick, so they can't go to work anymore. They lose their insurance. They apply for disability or Medicare or Medicaid, and then before they get approved, they die. Because there's this gap that happens. And so this family doctor said, tying our health insurance to our job is the worst thing for us and our health that we could possibly have done. It's also really, really bad for the economy. How many Americans think about changing jobs or even starting a business of their own, but then get stopped in their tracks because they think, what can I do about my health care? Just raise your hand and you're one. Like millions of us. So this current employment-based system's locking us in place in very negative and nasty ways. So we need to get healthcare off the backs of us, our families, and our employers, and just have it as a right of citizenship. And I know this would work because my parents went to Asia and are kind of half retired there, half retired here. I thought the grandkids would entice them to spend more time here. It's like, it's working sort of. Not that we had the kids for that, you know what I mean. Anyway. But they were staggered by how seamless and inexpensive the healthcare is in Asia, where they just walked in and they got a procedure done. The hospital was like, that'll be $20. And they're like, really? And they just give it to them, they just like walk on out. And they're like, what is going on? And Taiwan is not as rich a country as the United States of America. It's not like they're somehow just much, much richer. It's just that the true costs are being passed along to consumers in a way that is not the case here. There was a doctor who said that there's a prescription that costs us $150. Guess how much it costs him to source it directly? $2. That's closer to the true cost of what's going on. So we're getting it stuck to us in our healthcare costs in epic ways. And for seniors here who are worried about our prescription drug prices, I've got a 5-part plan to get the drug prices down very, very quickly. And it does not consist of saying the drug companies do the right thing. Yeah, no, they don't care. It's all about like hitting where it hurts. So there are 3 sources of inflation in America that are making us miserable right now. Healthcare is 1, education is 2, so that's your college loan, and then number 3 is housing. And so I have detailed plans to attack healthcare costs and education costs in this country. Housing is a little trickier, but I would have federal incentives to try and help with affordable housing development. That one's more of a local issue. If we can get education and healthcare costs under control, it would be a massive lift to our economy and our families. I don't know if you want me to go through either of those plans.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's see the college.
I'll do prescription drugs. I think there are more people here. Or actually, it'll be a democracy. Raise your hand for prescription drugs. No one. Raise your hands for college. All right, we'll do college. Good call. See democracy in action. I'll do college. Why not? All right. Why has college gotten 2.5 times more expensive in the last 25 years? Did it get 2.5 times better? No. Did they hire lots of new teachers?
No.
This one's a little trickier. Did they build more buildings and facilities?
Yes.
Yes, but that isn't why the cost went up. Because you actually can get donors to pay for that stuff.
Because
They
we
really
just
like.
give you loans. Because loans are readily available to go.
So that's part of it, but that's not what drove the prices up. That's what allowed them to drive the prices up. The reason why they're so much more expensive is that the administrator to student ratio went up 150%. And in that time, prices went up 250%. So that's driving a whole lot of it. These are not teachers. These are just bureaucrats, vice deans, and whatever the heck. And states have provided less funding, so that's been another factor. But to your point, if you're a family and your kid wants to go to college and college just keeps going up and up in price, you feel like you have no choice but to pay. So then the government says, don't worry about it, here's some loans, And so now we're up to $1.6 trillion in student loan debt and counting. And here's the dirty secret, or not so secret. There's a 40 to 44% chance that after you graduate from college, you're going to do a job that does not require a college degree. Does the college then, in that case, forgive you your student loan? No. So that is why we're sticking our young people with this mountain of debt, and they're just like, what the heck is going on? Like, this doesn't make much sense. The truth is, it doesn't make much sense. And part of it is that the universities, because they're nonprofits, have had license to jack up their prices every year. Any business model that consists of just raising your prices every year, you have to kind of question. But there are two industries where they do that: healthcare and education. Has anyone gotten this letter from their insurance company? Great news, your rates are lower this year?
No.
None of us has ever gotten that letter, because their business model just builds in a price increase. So what you have to do if you're going to get the cost of education down is you have to go to the universities and say, hey, you're getting all this aid from the government. At a minimum, you're tax exempt, which saves you billions and billions of dollars. So we're going to work with you to get your administrator to student ratio down to what it used to be and get your prices down. They'll look up and say, hey, that's impossible. We need all of these people. And then you'll say, well, I think you'll figure it out because your government support's on the line. And then they would figure it out. They would cut some of these administrators, and then they would realize that those administrators had no impact on the student experience and no real impact on their functioning. And I say this as someone who's run a national nonprofit. If you're a nonprofit administrator, your natural impulse is to hire more people like yourself. That's why they're not spending it on professors, they're spending it on more people like themselves. And they just keep passing the cost along to us, and it's like a hidden tax increase. So you have to try and get them down. I would forgive a significant chunk of the student loan debt that's out there. Because do we want our young people living in our basements and paying off these loans forever? Or do we want them buying homes, starting families, maybe even starting a business and moving the country forward? And when people say, it's like, oh, how can you do that? We had a similar choice 12 years ago. The choice was between bailing out our Wall Street banks for $4 trillion or keeping Americans in their homes. Which should we choose? The banks. Remember that? Remember voting for that? Of course not. None of us were voting for that. I was so disgusted by that decision that I quit my job, started a nonprofit, and ran for 7 years to try and do something positive because it was so corrupt to me. We're going to do the same thing after I'm president, but this time we're going to choose our people and not the banks. And that's one reason why we need to get some of the student loan debt off of our kids.
I got time for one more question. Yes, ma'am?
Well, for the 12 years, or the first 12 years of education.
You mean K through 12?
12 years of education, then run the same way.
All right, so K through 12. Actually, what are you going to ask me? Let me ask a question to you guys.
About gun violence.
Oh, wow, those are kind of different. Maybe
School shootings.
yeah. I'll actually talk about K through 12 and then tie it into gun violence. Believe it or not, I actually think they're related. So there are a few things we should do for our schools very, very quickly. Number one, we should pay teachers more. And that's not a creative thing, that's a data thing. A good teacher is worth your weight in gold in terms of better educational outcomes over dozens of kids over all the years. I mean, it's a lot of impact. Number two, we need to help schools have the resources to address kids who are like my son, neurologically atypical, have special needs, need more individualized attention. Right now, DC is paying for 15% of that in our communities, 15. I say it should be 100% and make it so that these schools have more access to the resources that our kids need. Number three, we should lighten up the standardized tests. Did you know that we popularized the SAT during World War II as a means to identify which kids not to send to the front lines? And now we treat our kids like every year is wartime. Does that make sense? And if you're a teacher, you're changing your behavior based on the tests. We have to trust the teacher to know what to do based upon the child that's in front of them and not have our schools be like assembly lines because our kids are not widgets, they're different from each other. Now, I'm going to tie this into gun violence because I think that there's a whole chain of things that's leading to gun violence in our country. And we have to face facts that 98% of the shooters we're talking about are boys. So you have to look at why we're having trouble turning our boys into healthy young men. And part of it is what's going on in our schools. That if you show up to our school, and I say this as the parent of an autistic boy, if you have the wrong boy in the wrong school and it's not a fit, then the struggles that that boy can experience can be very, very devastating for that child, but sometimes those struggles can even manifest in violence or things that affect the community writ large. So if we get into the guts of our schools, we have a chance to actually put a dent in gun violence. We need to invest in mental health infrastructure throughout our country. And I say this as my brother is a psychology professor, so this is near and dear. That would help with gun violence. We do need common sense gun safety laws in our country, things that most all of us agree on, like universal background checks and red flag laws, while also reassuring law-abiding gun owners that, look, we're not going to take your guns. That's not what we're talking about here at all. I'm going to say on a personal level, I got a letter from one of my boys' schools that they're having an active shooter drill in their school. My son is 4. I went looking for studies showing that these active shooter drills saved lives. I could not find a shred of evidence that said they do. I then looked for some documentation around the fact that these active shooter drills cause stress, anxiety, uncertainty, and confusion, and I found a giant stack. So if this is the case, we should not be mandating active shooter drills in our schools. We should just leave it to the families and communities to decide if that's what they want. And if they don't want it, then they shouldn't have it. So these are some of the things I think we can do to help alleviate gun violence, but it's going to be an ongoing challenge for a long time to come, unfortunately, because it's not something you can just legislate away with one thing. We have to attack it in our families, our schools, our mental health infrastructure, our larger economy, because if you don't feel like you have economic prospects, it also can contribute to a sense of negativity, despair, mental illness, and sometimes violence. So we have to try and attack it at every single level.
All right, let's give a round of applause. Next up, and you can stick around for photos. We're going to start the line right here between this little aisle right here. And it'll be around a Mingle Live Feast. Got around, let's call it 10 minutes or so here. Just hang out with everybody, and then we got to get back on the bus. Thank you guys.
If you'd like a picture with Andrew, we'll ask you to have your phone out on camera, and we're going to line up right here towards the back of the room, single file it on.
Thank you for everybody's been here. Gotta make sure we get next event. Interviews, next event. Gotta find food or something. We love the Yang Yang. Check out this business. Check out the Business Insider interviews. About Andrew Yang. Came out today.
Alright guys, sorry I'm back. I was uploading Andrew Yang on Fox News Sunday, which is now up. But meanwhile, our top donor is currently Christopher at $420. Who is going to get the shout out? Will it be Christopher? We already have Jeffrey from the last event who donated $500 at the last minute and stole the shout out. Unfortunately, we were having connection issues. And because of those connection issues, we could not get the shout out at that event. But don't worry, Jeffrey, we got you at $500. And then, what else do we have? We have Donnie last night donated $750. So I'm gonna keep a close eye on the Act Blue, and you guys just let me know how it's going. Oops, I'm sorry, sir.
I will.
Meanwhile, while you guys are busy donating to help Andrew hit his $3 million FVC end of month goal, I am going to be passing out merch.
Probably okay. I know, it's what it is. Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's awesome.
Well, I saw you come down the stairs, and I'm like,
Time to pass out all the merch.
Thanks for asking.
Where are you in Fox?
It's the middle school.
There's a back room.
Coming up there. I'm 19,
I've got the county chair, Captain Miller. Thank you for coming. I'm great.
That's tough job sometimes. Let me get you a book. Hang on.
Pull that chair closer.
We make sure you get one of these.
Oh, wonderful.
Thank you. Is it Kathy with the C or K?
Yeah.
We've been there. It's quite a.
Thank you. I'm so glad. Yeah, we gotta fix things for the people in your county because the water's going out. They're coming back.
Yeah.
It's a great.
Where's your phone? It's here for you. I know. I just
Say hi to JD. Say hi to JD. I know JD. Okay. Brad. Public policy. Yeah, it's okay. You got him in 90 seconds.
No, I've never had to see you before.
I'm Julie. Nice to meet you. My son looks like previous name. Tyler.
I met Tyler.
Together and so on.
He told me I had I would love it. And I'm what's up? The healthcare crisis. I don't need it, right? I'm talking for you on Monday.
Yes! Thank Tyler for me too.
I will. He's in Vegas right now.
Good, you got some energy. Come on up.
Yes, it's like.
Don't worry about it, man. I'll get you one of those. I'll sign this one to you. I'm sure this is a good record. I'm not going to recognize.
I think so. Yeah. I think there is. We're working on getting on the top.
I have a question. My brother wants to come, but he's a registered practitioner. So what would you have to do?
When it comes to the topics, he's never done new voters.
But yeah, right now my family's here in Iowa.
Maybe we're going to have a new voter.
Thank you, appreciate you.
Do you work on the campaign? No. Oh.
Oh, thank you. Would you like a bumper sticker?
I got one. Thank you. I like your math hat.
Oh, maybe they have some of those.
Now I wish I hadn't committed to caucus for somebody else.
Oh, I love his videos. Oh. I would love one. I work at a school, and so we have hat day every other Friday. So It'll have a dual meaning.
Yes, that's what we like to hear.
Thank you. And I'm talking to you Monday for Andrew.
You want to do an interview real quick? On the
Okay.
camera?
All right.
Alright, let me go over here where we're out of the way. Or, I'm out
I'm
of
a
the
little
way.
nervous.
I'm nervous too.
Right, and then also
Gang? Gang. Alright, so what is your name?
Julie Cruz.
Julie, my name is Matt. Nice to meet
Matt,
you.
nice to meet you. My son Tyler works on the campaign.
Oh, wow, awesome.
Yes.
So, how did you first hear about Andrew Yang? Like,
Well, I actually originally started paying attention to his ideas when my son was hired. And then I did a little research on my own and love his ideas. Today was just amazing hearing his position on lots of different things.
would you say coming in here that you were still undecided or considering Andrew among other candidates? Or
No,
he
he's
was
my
already?
own. He's my own.
Already?
And now it's just more reaffirmed.
Awesome. So
Everyone
he
should hear
didn't
this
he didn't say anything to change your mind. That's good.
Absolutely not. No.
And so you're going to be caucusing next Monday for
Yes.
Andrew Yang.
Yes.
And do you live here in Panora?
No, I live at a little lake outside of Dexter, so our caucusing place is West Central Valley High School in Stewart.
Awesome. Do you know have you caucused before?
No.
Oh, so this will be your
He is
first
my
time
first guy to
caucusing.
caucus.
That's so awesome to hear because I think that's a great thing about Andrew is his message is inspiring a lot of people who traditionally either haven't voted in a while because they're just so tired of the back
and I
and
always
forth.
vote, but I have never caucused, so.
Or just people who've never like just cared enough to vote in the primary before. So that's really shows how inspiring his message is. So
He's great today. Just I had goosebumps listening to him.
Wow.
He's authentic, and I just appreciate where he's coming from.
awesome. Well, thank you for coming out.
Thank
and,
you.
Thanks for letting your son work on the campaign.
Yes, he loves it. He's in Vegas right now.
Vegas.
Must be getting ready for.
Nevada.
Yeah. Well, nice to meet you.
You too.
Thank you.
Would you like a bumper sticker?
I'll take a few more things. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, there's never enough.
I'll recruit some people.
Yeah.
One more thing.
That's gotcha.
Thank you.
Alright, I gotta bother Andrew real quick.
I opened up a package that was addressed to myself. And inside had his business card and mine. So the funny thing is, like, I have his in my card.
Okay, let's see if any more donations have come in. Thank you, Martin, for the $25 donation to Andrew Yang. Thank you, Andy, for the $5 donation to Andrew Yang. Thank you, Alex, for the $10 donation to Andrew Yang. Thank you, Anna, for the $1 donation to Andrew Yang. Thank you, Shuhan, for the $5 donation to Andrew Yang. Thank you, Phil, for the $4.20 donation to Andrew Yang. Thank you, Brendan, for the $5 donation. Thank you, Christopher, who is our donation leader at $420 for the $420 donation to Andrew Yang. Thank you, Phil, for the $7.70 donation to Andrew Yang. Thank you, Chester, for the $100 donation to Andrew Yang. And then that brings us back to where we were earlier. And now I need to bother the candidate. Andrew, could I get 3 shout-outs for Jeffrey, who donated $500, Donnie, who donated $750, and then Christopher, who donated $420.
Sure thing. Jeffrey, Donnie, and Christopher, thank you all so much. You're fueling us on this super important day. Just made the debate, new high water mark and polls, and we're going to shock the world, but we couldn't do it without your help. So thank you. Thank you, guys.
Yang gang.
Yang gang.
All right, Donnie, so we re-got you. Did you get a bumper sticker or anything like that?
I asked one guy if I could get a book, so he went to go maybe grab another one.
All right, I'll get you. Bumper stickers? Or regular stickers?
I got a button.
Oh, button. You wanted a button?
No, I asked the other guy to grab a book for me. So he
Okay,
went to do
sweet.
that.
Okay. They have books somewhere. Hopefully they bring it to you. All right. What's your name?
Jacob?
Jacob, my name's Matt. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Matt.
Yep. All right, stream. The candidate is leaving, which means we are also...